Although Boltanski has described himself as a painter, his art can't be so easily categorized. It moves between photography and sculpture, at times combining to create large-scale theatrical installations. His work has been bought by museums and private collectors all over the world, but it's also been seen outside galleries, in churches, in warehouses, and in libraries. Boltanski has used the debris of everyday life, from old photographs and biscuit tins to cardboard and wrapping paper, found in places like flea markets and lost property offices. Our portrait also includes voices from his art texts, what they remember about me.
He seemed very shy. He never looked at you straight in the eye. What I didn't like about him was that he never looked sincere.
He was very nice with everyone, and people said that fellow was too nice to be honest.
At first, he made quite an impression on me. Later, I learned to know him better and to separate the real from the illusory, the comic from the tragic in him.
At table, he didn't know how to hold his knife and fork. He ate rather fast and messily, which is strange for someone raised in a bourgeois family.
I'm trying to install a shadow piece, a shadow theater. That's a lot of little puppets in cardboard. And with the lights, it becomes big shadows, but it's always very complicated to install because it moves all the time. You change one puppet, you must change all the other puppets. And it's, it's like a dance macabre, but it's a nice dance macabre. If you're in a very large room, you can have shadows of 3 or 4 meters high. And some object was so stupid becomes an important object with a shadow. Some object was so simple, only metal wire, and becomes something with looks important.
Christian has dealt with death and his own imminent death from the very beginning. He has always been fascinated with death, or obsessed with death, you might say, and has really faked his death many times throughout his career.
Can you tell us something about the world into which you were born? As I understand it, you were born around Liberation Day and into what we would consider to be a rather unusual family with an unusual history. Could you tell us a little about that?
Oh, yes, but I think first, everybody is born in a strange family in a strange time. But for me, it's true that I was born just during the time of the liberation of Paris, and my real first name is Christian Liberté, Christian freedom, but it was a little too heavy, you know. Liberté, be quiet. Liberté, don't do that. That's a little difficult. And I was born from a Jewish father and a Corsican mother. And during the war, like everybody, like all the Jewish, my father, he has a lot of problems. He had to be hide in a very small places at home in the house of my parents, and they put him under the floor in a very, very small place, and he stayed during 1 year there. And I think he was rather happy there because he was a very quiet man, and it was nothing me in the little place under the ground floor. And I born just at the good times and just at the freedom of Paris. What I wanted to say with this piece, that the Nazis were not different from us. They were us, because it would be much more easy to think that the Nazis were all the devils. And in fact, they were just sweet and nice people. And it's possible for a man to love his own baby on the morning time and to kill babies on the afternoon. What I was touched with these photos, that these photos are so sweet, most of them. I mean, you have photo with soldiers and babies, with fiancés, with Christmas trees, and you know that he's making his Christmas trees here, or there's sweet mariage, and people are laughing, and people are just alive and just normal. And by example, if you see these two young ladies, there's a portrait of Hitler, but they look so sweet, and I'm sure they were sweet. What frightened me is that I think that a part of us can become Nazi tomorrow.
What do you think that means, Christian? I mean, I think that's a very interesting point, but why do you want to bring this to our attention?
Because it seems to me that if we thought that the Nazis are the others, we are not going to be frightened to become Nazi. Or the Nazi is something that we say, oh no, we're just normal. No, the Nazis were so awful. But we are Nazi, perhaps we are Nazi, all of us are Nazi, and a little part of the day, we are just like a Nazi, or we can be Nazis. I mean, and for this one, we must really to take care.
You did the same thing in the series on Detective, didn't you? Where you showed a series of photographs where you had murderers and victims, but you didn't say who was who, and it's quite a guessing game.
No, that is sure. The victim of a day can become the criminals of tomorrow. The criminals are sometimes people who are very unhappy and very sweet and very nice, and they can cry also, and we can pray for them also. I mean, they are not bad people. Everybody is good in a way.
As far as I understand, you didn't go out alone. Your father didn't want you to go out alone because you were still worried about anti-Semitism. You didn't go out alone, at a house alone, until you were 18. I know everybody's a strange life, but this is stranger than most. Can you talk a little bit about those? Why was your father so very, very, very protective of you? And presumably your brothers and sisters as well.
It was a strange family. I mean, I don't like so much to speak about that, but it was a strange family. I mean, my father was a good doctor and a rather famous doctor, but after the war, it was very difficult for him to walk alone in the street. And each morning, with my mother, we wait for him in front of the hospital during 2 hours every morning. And on the afternoon, if he had to see patient, we always go to the car with him and wait for him during 1 hour or so. And
so he was frightened to go out alone, really?
He never speak to me about that, but it was the rules. I mean, I never saw him to go to the post office or something like that. But the first time I walked alone in the street when I was 18, And, you know, when you are a child, and perhaps I was a little strange child, but it seems so normal.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
everything's
only the
normal.
rules of the family. And, for example, we had a rather large house, but on the night, everybody was sleeping in the same rooms. I mean, the parents in a bed, and all the children, my two brothers and me, in sleeping bag around the bed of the parents, and all the other rooms were empty. But, you know, I mean, I think that's, in a way, normal.
As a child, he was very quiet and sat for hours without moving or speaking.
As a child, he never spoke and seemed a bit disturbed.
When I was young, I was very often at the Musée de l'Homme, with the Ethnological Museum in Paris. And for me, it was very, very important because I thought that these vitrines are a little tomb of cultures. In each vitrine, you have a culture with a dead culture. And these very heavy vitrines are just like tombs. And inside, you have the memory of people who now disappeared mostly. And you have some kind of stupid little object. And nobody knew exactly what it was used for, but there's some kind of a memory of people. I play very often in my art with the idea of anthropology or ethnological problems. By example, I have made what I call inventory of people, to put in vitrines all the object who belongs to somebody and make a museum with that.
You left school at 11 and, as I understand it, started to paint at home and didn't go back to school. How did that affect you? That's, again, a quite unusual thing to do. And why did you decide to paint then?
Because I was really completely stupid. And then, you know, I was a little strange. And everything was bad about me. I mean, I always escaped from the school, and it was always terrible, and it was impossible for me to write, and it's always impossible for me to write, and all this kind of thing. And one day, I made a little object in plasticine, and one of my brothers told me, oh, it's good, it's lovely. And it was the first time that somebody told me that I made something was good. And I decided to be my job, and I began to make drawings, and after very, very large painting, and I made hundreds and hundreds of very large painting, bad painting, hundreds of them, religious painting.
But in England at that time, we're talking about the mid-50s, if you left school at 11, the parents, the authorities, the teachers would have kicked up a fuss. What happened here?
Oh, because I was ill, and I have some kind of, you know, say, I was a little crazy in a way. And it was possible for this reason, because they say he can go to school because you see he escape always of the school, and he's so strange that he must stay at home. But what I think that I was a little strange, but also really my parents wanted that. I mean, because my brother, they are more normal, but also they stopped to go to school during 3 or 4 years and studied at home.
So none of you went to school?
No.
Right. Well, that's one way to go about it.
I teach as a class in the Beaux-Arts of Paris, but first I'm not sure to be a good teacher. I think I'm a rather bad teacher. And I have very, very few students. And we do nothing. It seems to me that there's nothing to learn and nothing to teach in art. The only reason that I do that is because for me it is very important to find a place like art school, especially the School of Beaux-Arts, which is so unuseful. In most of the schools, if you want to be a doctor, you studied well and you are somebody, or you are a doctor. Here, everybody knows that it's completely unuseful. And for me, what is unuseful is sometimes very, very useful. It seems to me that it's very important for an artist to stay at home, and to do nothing, and to wait. And the real good time to work is when you do nothing, only to wait and to be a little depressed and to try to think about what that means to be an artist. And by example, I'm not quite sure that it's so good for me to make this film with you, because, you know, perhaps it's too romantic, but for me an artist must be a little outside of the reality and to be in his own head and dreaming.
Christian spent many hours wandering alone in the lost property.
I don't think he had any intimate friends. He was a rather solitary soul.